Humans are masters of war, the alien transmission declared, capturing the attention of every sentient who cared to listen. But few believed it. The galaxy had become a crowded place, teeming with civilizations, and humanity was the newest kid on the block. They were seen as an aggressive, untested species by the established powers. Rumors swirled of their prowess in battle, but most dismissed such talk as the boasting of a young race trying to prove itself. One of those who took the rumors more seriously was Mark Roberts, a battle-hardened human soldier. He was part of an expeditionary force dispatched to the far reaches of space, tasked with making first contact with the Sakari, a warrior race known for their martial pride. The humans hoped to forge a bond of friendship and open the doors to trade. Mark knew it wouldn't be easy, but he never expected it to turn into a fight for survival. As the human ship entered Sakari space, alarms blared. They were under attack, their shields buckling under the onslaught of a Sakari warship that had appeared from nowhere. The humans were outgunned and outnumbered, their vessel taking heavy damage. Commander Hydrus, the Sakari leader, watched with satisfaction as he prepared to eliminate the intruders. But Mark was not ready to die, nor to let this mission fail. As the ship shook and sparks flew, he devised a desperate plan, a last-ditch gambit that could save them all, or doom them to a cold death in the void. If he failed, not only would the crew perish, but the fragile hope of peace between humanity and the Sakari would be shattered before it even began. Gathering a strike team of his best soldiers, Mark prepared to do the unthinkable, board the Sakari ship and fight his way to the bridge, forcing a surrender. It was a long shot, but it's all they had. The fate of his crew, the mission, and perhaps the future of his species now rested on his shoulders. As he checked his weapon and steeled himself for the fight to come, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that this battle, however it ended, would be a turning point. The Sakari were about to learn that there was truth to the rumors, that when pushed to the brink, humans could be masters of war, and the galaxy would never be the same. Mark lunged for the alien ship's control console, his fingers flying across the unfamiliar interface as he struggled to reroute power to the shields. Behind him, Hydrus grappled with Zorgax's second-in-command, their limbs a blur of motion as they traded bone-crunching blows. "Got it," Mark shouted, smacking his palm down on the final button. The ship shuddered as the doomsday weapon overloaded, tearing itself apart in a blaze of searing light visible even through the reinforced viewports. But their victory was short-lived. Warning klaxons blared as the ship's engines faltered, the strain of the battle taking its toll. Mark and Hydrus exchanged a grim look as they strapped themselves in, bracing for impact. The crash was brutal, the ship slamming into the planet's surface with terrifying force. Mark blacked out, his head lolling against the restraints. When he came to, Hydrus was dragging him from the smoking wreckage, the Sakari's face grim. "We're stranded," Hydrus growled, his eyes scanning the horizon. "And this planet, it's not on any of our charts." As the days crawled by, they fought to survive, foraging for food and water, huddling together for warmth against the chilling night winds. A grudging respect slowly grew between them, born of shared hardship and the recognition of each other's strengths. Mark crafted a makeshift spear from the wreckage, his hands steady as he worked the metal. Hydrus, in turn, proved an unparalleled hunter, his senses hyper-attuned to the slightest sign of prey. But the planet held deadlier threats than mere starvation. One evening, the ground beneath their feet trembled, then buckled as a monstrous creature erupted from the earth. It was all muscle and fangs, its hide thick with armored plates. Mark and Hydrus fought as one, moving in perfect sync. Mark leapt and rolled, drawing the beast's attention with darting strikes, while Hydrus waited for an opening. When it came, he struck with devastating force, his claws rending flesh and bone. In the aftermath, as they tended to their wounds, Hydrus clasped Mark's shoulder. "You fought well, human," he rumbled, respect shining in his eyes. Their newfound bond faced its greatest test when they discovered the hidden Kryn outpost. The sight of the twisted experiments within turned Mark's stomach, but it was the data logs that chilled him to his core. "They're planning genocide," he whispered, horror and rage warring in his voice. We have to stop them. But the Kryn had other ideas. Mark and Hydrus found themselves pinned down, outnumbered and outgunned, their weapons clicking empty as the enemy closed in. Mark closed his eyes, preparing for the end. Only for the sky to ignite with the fire of ship-to-ship combat. Reinforcements had arrived, human and Sakari side by side, united against a common foe. The tide turned in a heartbeat, the Kryn falling before the onslaught. As Mark and Hydrus were hustled to safety, they shared a look of steadfast perseverance. The Kryn had been exposed, their vile plans dragged into the light, and the galaxy would respond with the full might of an alliance forged in blood and fire. The path ahead was clear. The Kryn had to be stopped, their empire of cruelty and oppression torn down at any cost, and Mark and Hydrus would lead the charge, brothers in arms, human and Sakari as one. For in the face of annihilation, there could be no half measures. It was time for war, time for the galaxy to learn the true meaning of unity, and time for the Kryn to learn what it meant to pick a fight with the masters of war. The battered remnants of the human Sakari fleet gathered in the shadow of a gas giant, their hulls scarred and scorched from countless battles. Mark Roberts stood on the bridge of the newly christened flagship, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of Kryn space. "We strike here," he said, pointing to a pulsing red dot deep within enemy territory. "The forge." Hydrus loomed beside him, mandibles clicking in anticipation. "A bold move, brother. The Kryn will not expect us to penetrate so far into their domain." "That's what we're counting on," Mark replied. "We hit hard, we hit fast, and we cripple their ability to wage war." The assault began with a thunderous barrage as the Allied fleet dropped out of hyperspace, catching the Kryn defense forces off guard. But the element of surprise could only carry them so far. Soon, the space around the forge was a maelstrom of plasma fire and exploding ships. Mark gritted his teeth as another Allied cruiser vanished in a ball of flame. "We're getting pounded out here. Time for Plan B." He assembled a small team of elite operatives, human and Sakari alike. Their target, a Kryn destroyer on the edge of the battle. Using stealth tech reverse-engineered from captured Kryn vessels, they slipped aboard undetected. The ship's corridors were a maze of alien architecture, but Mark moved with purpose. He'd studied Kryn ship schematics for months in preparation for this moment. When they reached the main cannon control room, Mark's fingers flew across the unfamiliar console. "Uploading virus now," he muttered. "Let's hope this works." A tense moment passed, then chaos erupted across the Kryn fleet. Ships began to drift, their weapon systems offline. Mark allowed himself a grim smile. "That's our window. All ships, push through." With the path cleared, Mark and Hydrus led the charge onto the forge itself. They fought side by side through hordes of Kryn monstrosities, creatures warped beyond recognition by sick experimentation. "By the old gods," Hydrus growled as they reached the central lab. "What manner of abominations are these?" Before them stood a nightmarish fusion of flesh and metal, its maw dripping acid as flames licked from its nostrils. It lunged at them with terrifying speed. In the chaos, Mark found himself cut off from Hydrus, trapped in a sealed chamber with the Kryn's ultimate creation. The beast towered over him, its very presence radiating an aura of extinction. Mark's mind raced, assessing the situation with cold precision. His eyes landed on a network of glowing tubes running along the walls, fuel lines for the mutagenic process. With a desperate lunge, he jammed his plasma rifle into one of the tubes and opened fire. The chamber filled with searing light as the creature howled in agony, consumed from within by its own mutagen. When the flames died down, Mark stumbled out to find Hydrus waiting. "To the reactor," Mark gasped. "We end this now." But at the reactor core, they found the Kryn overlord waiting. The alien's eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence as it revealed the true scope of its plan. "Your victory here means nothing. Our missiles are already en route to your homeworlds. The age of Kryn dominance begins now." A furious battle erupted. Mark and Hydrus fighting as one against the Overlord and its guards. When the dust settled, the Kryn lay defeated, but the countdown to annihilation ticked on. "There's only one way to stop those missiles," Mark said, his voice heavy with the weight of what must be done. "Hydrus, I need you to pilot the flagship. We're going to use it as a battering ram." Hydrus nodded solemnly. "It has been an honor fighting by your side, Mark Roberts." As Hydrus set course for one missile, Mark coordinated the remaining fleet to intercept the other. The next moments were a blur of desperate maneuvers and last-second course corrections. Then, silence. The missiles were destroyed, but at a terrible cost. The forge was a drifting wreck, and Mark found himself trapped in the shattered remains of the Allied command ship. As consciousness faded, Mark's last thought was of Hydrus. He hoped his friend had survived. Mark Roberts opened his eyes, the fluorescent lights of the medical bay stabbing into his skull. He groaned, pushing himself upright despite the protest of his battered body. The events of the battle rushed back, a tide of adrenaline and fear. "Hydrus!" he croaked, his voice raw. "The missiles!" A nearby nurse placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Easy, Commander. You've been out for days." Mark shrugged off her touch, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "I need to know what happened. Where's Hydrus?" The door hissed open, revealing the towering form of his Sakari ally. Hydrus's normally proud stance was bent, his shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "Mark!" Hydrus rumbled, his voice thick with emotion. "You're awake." Mark took in his friend's appearance, the fresh scars, the haunted look in his eyes. "What's wrong? Did we—" Hydrus shook his head, mandibles clicking in distress. "We failed, brother. One of the missiles, it struck my home world." The words hit Mark like a physical blow. He stumbled, catching himself on the bed frame. "No, that's not possible. We intercepted them all." "Not all," Hydrus said, his voice breaking. "Come, you need to see." Mark followed Hydrus to the bridge, his legs unsteady. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that made his blood run cold. The once verdant Sakari homeworld was a charred husk, vast swathes of its surface glowing with radioactive fire. "By all that's holy," Mark whispered, pressing a hand against the cool glass. "How many—" "Millions dead," Hydrus growled, his fists clenched at his sides. "More dying by the hour. The mutagen, it's changing those who survived, warping them into monsters." Mark turned to his friend, seeing the pain etched into every line of his alien face. "There has to be something we can do, some way to save your people." Hydrus's eyes flashed with a desperate light. "There is. An ancient tradition long forgotten, cryogenic preservation." "Cryosleep?" Mark frowned. "For how long?" "As long as it takes," Hydrus said, his voice hardening with commitment. "Until we can find a new home, or cleanse our world of this taint." Mark nodded slowly, the enormity of the plan sinking in. "The brass won't like it. They'll say it's too risky, that it could destabilize the alliance." "Then we do it without their blessing," Hydrus snarled. "Will you stand with me, brother? Will you help me save what's left of my people?" Mark clasped Hydrus's forearm, human fingers interlocking with Sakari claws. "To the end, my friend, whatever it takes." The next weeks were a blur of frantic activity. Mark and Hydrus led a covert task force to the Sakari homeworld, fighting through pockets of mutated horrors and Kryn remnants alike. They established a beachhead in the equatorial zone, one of the few areas still habitable. As they worked to evacuate survivors and set up the cryogenic facilities, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time. The Kryn might be broken, but they weren't beaten. Not yet. One evening, as the red sun sank below the horizon, Hydrus approached Mark with heavy steps. "It's time," he said quietly. "My family, they go into the long sleep tonight." Mark followed his friend to the preservation chambers, where Hydrus's maiden children waited. The fear in their eyes was palpable, but so was their trust in Hydrus. "I will watch over them," Mark promised as the cryopods began to close. "As if they were my own." Hydrus nodded, unable to speak. They stood vigil as the pods activated, sealing away the last hope of the Sakari race in icy slumber. The ground shook beneath their feet, a deep rumbling that grew stronger with each passing second. Alarms blared throughout the facility. "Orbital bombardment," a technician shouted. "Kryn ships firing from the asteroid belt." Mark and Hydrus exchanged a look of horror. They'd been found out, and now the Kryn were determined to finish what they'd started. "Get those transports in the air!" Mark roared, sprinting toward the command center. "We're leaving now!" As they raced to evacuate the last of the cryopods, the world around them began to die. The planet's crust buckled and split, magma boiling up from the wounded core. Mark felt a piece of his soul shatter as he watched Hydrus's homeworld torn apart by the Kryn's relentless assault. They barely escaped, their ships limping away from the dying planet. In the cold silence of space, Mark and Hydrus stood side by side, watching as the last traces of the Sakari homeworld faded from view. "It's gone," Hydrus whispered, his voice hollow. "Everything we were. Everything we might have been." Mark placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Not everything. Your people live on, Hydrus, and we'll find them a new home. I swear it." Before Hydrus could respond, a junior officer approached, her face pale. "Sirs, we've intercepted a transmission. You need to hear this." The message crackled to life, filling the bridge with the mad ravings of a Kryn cultist. Mark felt his blood run cold as he listened. The Kryn weren't finished. They'd dispatched teams across the galaxy, ready to unleash bioweapons that would make the Sakari tragedy look like a mercy killing. "We have to stop them," Mark said, his voice hard with conviction. "Whatever it takes." Hydrus nodded, a fierce light rekindling in his eyes. "Then let us hunt, brother, for the sake of all our people." Together, they set course for the first infected world, ready to face whatever horrors the Kryn had unleashed. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.